You lose fat from your face first, then your arms, then your chest. Yet your lower belly stays exactly the same, refusing every single effort you throw at it no matter how disciplined or consistent you actually are. I know that feeling intimately because I lived inside it for over a year, watching every part of my body change except the one part I actually cared about. At my heaviest, I sat around 30% body fat, frustrated, confused, and constantly Googling why nothing seemed to be working for me specifically. I cut my calories aggressively, added hours of cardio weekly, and threw in brutal high-intensity sessions just to force progress. The scale dropped steadily, my face got sharper, my shirts fit looser, but that stubborn lower belly pouch simply refused to leave. Then, almost a full year later, something unexpected happened that completely changed the direction of my approach. I trained less, stopped chasing extreme methods, and finally watched that stubborn fat disappear for good. What actually changed wasn't motivation, willpower, or some secret supplement nobody else knew about yet. I discovered 5 simple steps that quietly rewired how I approached fat loss entirely. But before revealing those steps, you need to understand why lower belly fat behaves so differently from everywhere else. Most people never realize this simple truth, so let's break it down clearly together right now. Not all belly fat sitting on your body is created or stored equally at all. Picture every fat cell in your body as its own tiny individual storage unit. When you consistently eat more energy than your body actually needs, some get stored away. Those storage units slowly expand, and over time, your total body fat percentage steadily increases. Create an energy deficit instead, and the complete opposite process begins happening inside your body. Your body starts pulling from stored energy, and those same fat cells gradually begin shrinking down. Simple enough to understand, right? But around your stomach, fat actually exists in 2 distinct places. The first type is subcutaneous fat, the soft layer sitting directly underneath your skin's surface. This is the belly fat you can literally grab and pinch between 2 fingers easily. The second type is visceral fat, sitting much deeper inside, surrounding your internal organs completely. Excess visceral fat matters significantly for your health, since higher levels connect to increased cardiometabolic risk over time. Here's exactly where things start becoming genuinely frustrating for almost everyone trying to lose stubborn fat. Even while your overall body fat keeps decreasing steadily, your visible lower belly can seem frozen in time. That explains why your face looks thinner, your shoulders look sharper, your pants fit noticeably better every week, yet somehow, staring at your lower stomach, that same stubborn pocket appears completely unchanged and unaffected. This doesn't mean your diet suddenly stopped working or that something went seriously wrong recently. It definitely doesn't mean your body is somehow biologically incapable of losing that specific fat eventually. Different fat deposits simply respond differently throughout the entire weight loss journey for various documented reasons. Genetics, sex, hormones, and your individual fat distribution pattern influence which areas visibly lean out first. But something even more fascinating is happening deep inside those specific stubborn fat cells right now. Before your body can actually burn stored fat, it first needs to release it. That brings us directly to the first real reason certain fat feels so stubborn. Before stored fat gets used for energy, it must first exit the fat cell. This release process is called lipolysis, and it matters more than most people realize. Think of your fat cells like small fuel tanks sitting quietly throughout your entire body. Simply having fuel inside the tank isn't enough on its own to use it.
You first have to open the valve, and this is where things get interesting. Fat cells contain specific receptors that determine how strongly they respond to fat-burning signals. 2 commonly discussed receptor types are beta-adrenergic receptors and alpha-2 adrenergic receptors specifically. Beta signaling works like an accelerator, actively encouraging your body to mobilize stored fat quickly. Alpha-2 signaling works more like a brake, actively reducing that same mobilization response significantly. Different fat deposits across your body can have genuinely different biological characteristics affecting this process. This partly explains why researchers keep investigating why certain regions resist fat loss longer. This doesn't mean you can simply flip a switch and melt lower belly fat instantly. Your genetics, total body fat, hormones, energy balance, and fat distribution still matter enormously here. The real takeaway is refreshingly simple once you actually understand what's happening beneath the surface. Your body doesn't necessarily treat every single fat cell exactly the same way. So when your face looks noticeably leaner weeks into dieting, while your stomach looks unchanged, don't panic. That area may simply become visually noticeable much later during your overall transformation journey. But releasing stored fat represents only half of this entire complicated biological process happening inside you. Once fatty acids leave storage, they still need to enter circulation and reach hungry tissues. That leads us directly into the second reason stubborn areas remain genuinely fascinating to researchers everywhere. Even after successfully opening that fuel valve, you still need a highway to move it. Imagine you've successfully released fat from its storage cell deep inside your body already. There's still another problem waiting, because that released fuel has to travel somewhere useful eventually. Think of your bloodstream as a massive highway system, constantly transporting resources throughout your entire body. Once fatty acids enter circulation, they eventually get absorbed and used by hungry tissues nearby. But not every fat deposit shares identical blood flow characteristics or transportation efficiency across your body. Researchers have found real regional differences in adipose tissue blood flow and overall responsiveness. This helps explain why certain stubborn areas appear more resistant during active fat loss phases. There's another crucial piece of this puzzle worth understanding deeply: your entire hormonal environment throughout the day. Take insulin specifically, released heavily after eating meals containing meaningful amounts of carbohydrates regularly. Blood glucose rises after eating, and insulin helps move that glucose directly into hungry cells. Insulin also influences fat metabolism broadly, generally reducing fat mobilization while insulin levels remain elevated temporarily. Here's exactly where people constantly oversimplify this entire biological process into something misleadingly simple sounding. Insulin isn't some magical switch permanently locking your belly fat in place forever. Avoiding carbohydrates completely doesn't automatically guarantee you a flat, lean stomach overnight either. Over weeks and months, your overall energy balance still matters far more than anything else. Think of stubborn belly fat as several different factors interacting simultaneously inside your unique body constantly. Genetics, fat distribution, hormonal signals, regional physiology, and total body fat level all combine together. Together, these factors explain why two people on identical diets lose fat completely differently sometimes. One person's stomach shrinks early, while another loses fat everywhere except their stubborn lower belly first. This naturally raises an obvious question everyone eventually asks themselves during their own transformation journey eventually.
If belly fat feels stubborn locally, can't you simply train that exact area directly? Hundreds of crunches, leg raises, planks, sit-ups, repeated relentlessly every single day without exception. It sounds completely logical on paper, but this is exactly where the biggest myth begins forming. This is genuinely where millions of people waste countless hours chasing something that simply doesn't work. They stare down at their belly and immediately think, if fat sits here, train here directly. So they start doing endless crunches, then leg raises, then planks, sometimes hundreds of repetitions daily. Their abs burn intensely, their core gets noticeably stronger, they sweat considerably more than usual every session. But weeks later, they grab their stubborn belly and wonder why nothing is actually changed. because training a muscle and losing the fat covering it are two completely different processes. Ab exercises strengthen your core and, with enough resistance, can build muscle beneath your belly fat, but they don't give you precise control over which specific fat cells get used first. You genuinely cannot perform 100 crunches and command your body to burn exactly there. Fat loss happens across your entire body simultaneously, influenced heavily by genetics and individual biology constantly. This doesn't mean ab training is completely useless or a waste of your valuable time, though. Building thicker abdominal muscles makes your abs far more visible once you become sufficiently lean eventually. But if a significant fat layer still covers them, endless crunches simply won't solve your main problem. So instead of asking which exercise burns lower belly fat specifically, ask yourself a smarter question. How do I sustain overall fat loss long enough for stubborn areas to finally change? That single question completely transformed my entire approach towards sustainable, long-term fat loss success eventually. It brings us directly to the first and most important step of this entire plan. Not a supplement, not a special fasting window, not some secretive exercise nobody talks about. A calorie deficit you can genuinely maintain long enough to actually reach stubborn fat eventually. If you remember only one single thing from this entire video, please remember this specific point. Stubborn belly fat still responds predictably to a consistent energy deficit maintained over meaningful periods of time. To lose stored body fat, you must consistently consume less energy than your body actively uses. Here's exactly where most people make their very first critical mistake early into their fat loss journey. They assume if a small deficit works, a massive deficit must obviously work even faster. So they slash their food intake drastically, add daily cardio, and chase maximum possible weight loss immediately. The first week, the scale drops rapidly, creating false confidence and unsustainable excitement about their newfound progress. Then, hunger increases sharply, energy crashes noticeably, training performance suffers badly, and the entire diet becomes impossible eventually. That's exactly why the actual goal isn't creating the largest possible deficit you can physically tolerate. It's creating a sustainable deficit you can maintain long enough for stubborn areas to finally change. You accomplish this by eating slightly fewer calories, increasing daily activity levels, or combining both approaches together. Think of your fat loss journey like driving a car across an entire country slowly. You want your vehicle lighter and more efficient, not literally poking holes straight through your fuel tank. Yes, the car becomes lighter initially, but eventually you won't have enough fuel remaining. This matters enormously because lower belly fat likely won't be the first place you notice meaningful progress. Your face might lean out first, then your arms, then your waist, then finally your stubborn belly. This is exactly where most people quit prematurely, not because their plan actually stopped working correctly. They quit because they expected that final stubborn layer to disappear completely first instead. This brings us directly to something almost nobody honestly talks about, the actual stubborn fat timeline. Here's the part of fat loss that almost nobody adequately prepares you for beforehand mentally. Your body simply doesn't lose fat evenly across every single area at exactly the same rate. Imagine you've been dieting consistently for 6 straight weeks without missing a single day. The scale keeps dropping steadily, your face looks noticeably sharper, your shoulders show new visible definition finally. Your shirts fit considerably better than before, yet your lower stomach appears completely frozen and unchanged. This is exactly where many people start panicking unnecessarily during their otherwise successful fat loss journey. They cut calories even harder, add more punishing cardio, or abandon their entire plan completely overnight. But your body may still genuinely be making real, measurable progress beneath the visible surface constantly. Think of fat loss as climbing a stubborn ladder, one visible rung at a time. Early on, you'll likely notice changes across your face, arms, and general upper body first. As you continue losing overall body fat steadily, your waist gradually becomes noticeably smaller over time. Eventually, your upper abs may begin appearing clearly, revealing genuine progress finally becoming visible after weeks. For some people, that final stubborn lower belly pocket becomes visibly leaner only much later eventually. The exact order differs completely for every single person based on their unique individual biology entirely. Genetics, sex, starting body fat level, and individual fat distribution all influence where changes appear first. That's exactly why there's no universal timeline guaranteeing your belly disappears within 8 or 12 weeks specifically. My own transformation taught me something genuinely important that completely changed my entire mindset going forward. That final stubborn layer required real patience from me, not additional unnecessary punishment or excessive suffering constantly. So don't judge your overall progress based solely on one single stubborn area alone specifically. Track your weekly body weight trend, measure your waist regularly, and take standardized progress photos consistently. Watch closely how your clothes actually fit you differently week after week during this process. Because if those specific markers keep improving steadily, your plan is likely still genuinely working effectively. Now we can finally add the second step, something simple enough to repeat daily consistently. Walking. Something so simple most people completely overlook its genuine power for sustainable fat loss entirely. Now we arrive at one of the simplest tools I personally used to finally break through. Walking doesn't look impressive on camera, and it definitely won't leave you collapsed exhausted afterward physically. That's precisely why it works remarkably well for so many people attempting sustainable fat loss. Walking increases your daily energy expenditure without creating the same fatigue that intense cardio typically causes. More importantly, it's something you can realistically repeat consistently, day after day, month after month. Remember, losing that final stubborn layer is genuinely a marathon, not some quick 7-day challenge. Instead of forcing an arbitrary step target immediately, start honestly from your own current daily baseline instead. If you average 5,000 daily steps, gradually work towards 6,000 or 7,000 steps consistently. Take a relaxed morning walk. Walk casually after meals. Park farther away deliberately. Walk during phone calls. Add small movement opportunities throughout your day, between long periods of sitting whenever genuinely possible, consistently. Those tiny opportunities accumulate meaningfully without making your entire life revolve exclusively around structured cardio sessions. There's another significant advantage worth mentioning here that most people completely overlook during active fat loss. As you lose weight, your body may unconsciously compensate by naturally moving less throughout your day. Keeping your daily steps consistently high helps prevent that unconscious drop in everyday movement and activity. But don't misunderstand exactly how walking works within your broader fat loss strategy moving forward. Walking doesn't magically search specifically for your lower belly and burn fat directly from there. Its real power is simpler, increasing total energy expenditure while remaining genuinely sustainable long-term consistently. That's precisely what you need when stubborn fat requires weeks or potentially several months of consistency. For me personally, walking became far easier to maintain than repeatedly destroying myself through excessive intense training. That leads us directly to step 3, because another strategy made staying in deficit significantly easier, not because it magically burned belly fat directly, but because it changed exactly when I ate. The third strategy that genuinely made my diet easier to follow was intermittent fasting consistently applied. But there's something important you need to understand clearly before adopting this specific strategy yourself. Fasting isn't some magical belly fat switch that instantly transforms your entire body composition overnight completely. You can fast 16 hours, overeat during your remaining 8 hours, and still barely lose fat. The real advantage is often much simpler than most people online genuinely realize or explain properly. For many people, intermittent fasting simply makes maintaining a calorie deficit considerably easier throughout their entire day. Instead of eating from early morning until late night, you compress meals into a smaller window. A common example is 16-8 fasting, fasting 16 hours and eating within 8 hours. That approach felt genuinely practical for me personally throughout my entire fat loss transformation journey overall. Fewer eating opportunities meant fewer chances for random snacking and unnecessary.
Once your calorie deficit, daily walking, and eating routine feel consistently manageable, introduce HIIT strategically and carefully. HIIT alternates short bursts of intense effort with periods of easier active recovery throughout each session. For example, you might push hard for 20 to 30 seconds, then recover for 60 seconds. It's fast, genuinely challenging, and can meaningfully improve cardiovascular fitness while increasing overall energy expenditure significantly. But here's the honest mistake I personally made early during my own transformation journey, initially believing wrongly. I treated HIIT like some secret weapon specifically for stubborn belly fat, which it genuinely isn't. Doing more intervals doesn't force your body to pull fat specifically from your lower stomach area. If you're already dieting aggressively, adding excessive HIIT creates additional fatigue and makes recovery considerably harder overall. That's exactly why I personally prefer following a simple, logical hierarchy throughout my entire fat loss approach. First, control your calories consistently. Second, keep daily movement genuinely high. Third, strength train regularly and consistently. Then, if your recovery feels good and you genuinely enjoy higher intensity work, add HIIT strategically afterward. You don't need to completely destroy yourself physically since a few short intervals provide sufficient training stimulus. If running bothers your knees or joints, try lower impact alternatives like cycling, rowing, or swimming instead. Remember, HIIT functions purely as an accelerator, never the actual engine driving your overall fat loss forward. The real engine remains consistency, because losing that final stubborn layer requires months of effort, not days. But when people finally get close to their goal and progress slows, something predictable happens consistently afterward. They start searching desperately for shortcuts, fat-burning supplements, sweat-inducing tricks, waist trainers, mysterious specialized compounds. This is exactly where an otherwise smart fat loss plan quickly becomes unnecessarily complicated and genuinely counterproductive overall. Step 5 may honestly save you from falling into the single biggest trap most people eventually encounter. When you're finally getting lean and that last stubborn pocket refuses disappearing, the internet becomes genuinely dangerous. Suddenly, you'll see countless people recommending everything imaginable: sweat more, wear heavy hoodies, use waist trainers religiously, take caffeine religiously, try specialized fat-burning supplements, and they all promise identical results eventually, attacking stubborn belly fat directly. But remember exactly what we've already learned together throughout this entire detailed explanation so far. Sweating more doesn't automatically mean you're burning more abdominal fat specifically from that exact targeted area. A waist trainer might temporarily change how your waist visually appears, but doesn't selectively remove underlying fat whatsoever. Then there are supplements. Caffeine improves alertness and exercise performance somewhat, but cannot rescue a poorly managed diet. Whey protein can genuinely help too, though not because it magically burns fat directly from anywhere specifically. It simply provides a convenient method for increasing protein intake while potentially improving overall feelings of satiety. Then there's yohimbine, a compound frequently marketed specifically towards stubborn fat loss claims online repeatedly and aggressively. The underlying theory sounds interesting since it interacts specifically with alpha-2 adrenergic receptors mentioned earlier previously. But human evidence supporting meaningful fat loss, especially localized belly fat loss, remains genuinely mixed and inconclusive. It can also cause noticeable side effects, including anxiety, increased heart rate, and unwanted blood pressure changes. So don't build your entire transformation strategy around it, hoping desperately for some miraculous, unrealistic shortcut solution. Think of your overall fat loss strategy as a structured pyramid built carefully from bottom to top. At the very bottom sits calorie control, adequate protein, strength training, daily movement, quality sleep, and consistency. Near the top sits optional cardio and fasting strategies, useful but never mandatory for genuine long-term success. Only after that come the tiny details people love endlessly arguing about across social media constantly. Because if your foundation remains broken, absolutely no advanced trick will ever genuinely save your entire plan. This brings us directly back to the biggest question motivating this entire detailed explanation from the very beginning. Why do so many people lose meaningful weight but quit before that final stubborn layer disappears completely? So after covering all 5 steps thoroughly, we return to the exact question that started this entire journey. Why do so many people never successfully lose that final stubborn layer of belly fat specifically? Usually, it's genuinely not because their body remains biologically incapable of losing it eventually through consistent effort. It's because they simply stop too soon, right before real, meaningful progress finally becomes clearly visible. They diet for 2 weeks, watch the scale drop, yet their lower belly looks completely unchanged still. So they cut calories even harder, add more cardio, then HIIT, then fasting, then another questionable fat-burning hack. Eventually, they become exhausted, hungry, deeply frustrated, and ultimately quit entirely, abandoning months of genuine progress instantly. A few weeks later, they start completely over again, repeating the exact same frustrating, unsustainable cycle repeatedly. That specific cycle is precisely what you genuinely want to avoid throughout your own personal transformation journey moving forward. Instead, keep your entire system refreshingly simple and genuinely sustainable throughout your entire fat loss journey consistently. Step 1. Maintain a sustainable calorie deficit consistently without unnecessarily punishing yourself through extreme, unsustainable restriction constantly. Step 2. Increase daily walking and general movement gradually without forcing unrealistic, arbitrary step targets immediately overnight. Step 3. Use intermittent fasting only if it genuinely makes your diet easier to follow consistently. Step 4. Add cardio or HIIT strategically, never treating it as punishment for perceived lack of progress. Step 5. Keep supplements and stubborn fat hacks firmly at the bottom of your overall priority list. Throughout this entire process, prioritize adequate protein intake and consistent resistance training specifically to help preserve muscle. Remember the transformation mentioned earlier throughout this entire detailed explanation from the very beginning of this journey. The genuine breakthrough wasn't some magical exercise or miraculous supplement discovered accidentally during random online research somewhere. It was simply staying consistent long enough for overall body fat to keep steadily falling continuously. Your genetics will influence exactly where fat disappears first and precisely where it stubbornly disappears last eventually. For you specifically, that stubborn area might genuinely be your lower belly, potentially taking longer than expected. But slow, gradual progress absolutely doesn't mean zero progress is genuinely happening beneath the visible surface constantly. Your lower belly may honestly be the very last place to visibly change throughout this entire journey. That doesn't mean it won't eventually change significantly once you remain patient and genuinely consistent long enough. Now there's only one final question remaining, worth exploring carefully together in complete detail moving forward.